So we're going to do 6 sessions, and what's my title again? Navigating Torah in a secular society. And we're going to sort of talk about sort of like branching out to the issues of same-sex marriages, freedom of religion, and reproductive rights, which is the new term, that's the new politically correct term for the abortion debate. So that's what we're going to be dealing with. Now, the issue, or the essential issue, is that we live within 2 value systems within this world. Okay, we live within these 2 value systems within this world, within Canadian values and within Torah values. So in a certain way, you can look at this like, basically, it's like, if I had a blackboard, I would draw a large circle and then a small circle. But our smaller circle functions within Canadian system, or the American system, Western value system. And the question is how do we relate to both? How do we live within this influences of these 2 value systems? Now, part of the question is pragmatic. How do we function within these 2 value systems guiding us in a broad sense? The other question is just how do we respond to 2 value systems? So obviously, Torah is the primary system. Okay, we're not saying, hey, when do you deviate? Torah is the final arbiter. It's the final bottom line statement in terms of following what is correct. But the Torah our Torah value system operates within this broader system. So how does this broader system affect our understanding of what we should do as Torah Jews? And there are many specific aspects of it, on an individual basis, on a communal basis, and so forth. Let me give you an example in halachic terms of this question of what position we take within this broader sense. It's a famous question posed for Moshe Feinstein, who at the time was the major posek of America. And he was asked a question in the pro-choice versus pro-life debate. He was asked the question by the Aguda Public Policy Center, which basically intervenes on behalf of Orthodox positions, or basically, what should be the Orthodox position in the battle between pro-life and pro-choice? And your answer, you would say, is between pro-life and pro-choice? The Orthodox reason would you say pro-choice?
Pro-life.
Pro-life. Okay. Depends. Okay, so let's hear some ideas. Why would you say pro-choice?
It's all about choice. You have to choose it.
No, halachically, the halacha states that there's a certain value. So the point is, you would think you would want the halachic statement of a value. So pro-choice, what you're saying is a value of choice, which is a Western value. We have to question whether there's a value of giving choice within Torah. So the fact that you're saying pro-choice, is that a halachic position? Okay, you said pro-life.
Yes. As long as the mother's life is not in jeopardy, then you go ahead with the pregnancy. But if the mother's life, if it's between the mother dying or the baby dying, then the mother comes first.
Right, so that is basic. That's the most basic statement of the halachic principle. So you would think that, Ramosha said, we would support a law that says that pro-life, that we were against abortion unless the mother's life is at jeopardy. There are other positions within the halacha. There are positions that say there are other positions that do allow abortion within the halacha. Let's say Eliezer said you can abort in cases of same-sex babies. There's other positions, but that statement is the most normative statement of the halachic position. It's a question of whether you can abort for mother's health versus mother's life. Let's say she can go blind if it's a pregnant diabetes situation. She could go blind by becoming by going full term. Could you abort in that situation? These are questions within the halacha. Okay, you're following halacha, you go to a Rav and you say, what should I do? That's it. But the question here is, what should be the stance of the Orthodox institutions to advise what the law in the United States should be? That's the question. Should we be on the side of pro-choice or pro-life in the political debate over abortion law? You said it depends.
Well, I think my reason is similar to that which was presented here.
Okay.
It depends on the situation.
Okay. Ramosha's answer is that he told the Aguda, and this is basically the position. And interestingly enough, I don't know if Joe Lieberman actually did this because he actually asked a Shaila, or whether he just responded himself. But I did a search on Joe Lieberman's, right, Orthodox senator, Joe Lieberman's position and his choices on voting on abortion. He was the most pro-choice senator in the U.S. Senate. If you look it up in terms of what it is that he got 100% rating from the pro-choice people. The truth of the matter is, I would wonder if he did that because that was the answer of Ramosha. Ramosha said to the Aguda, your position has to be that you are in support of pro-choice, that a mother should be allowed to make any decision she wants in concert with her religious authorities. That should be our position. Okay, now why would Ramosha take that position in America? To be promoting a pro-choice. Any ideas? Because Ramosha was concerned about one thing. And it really opens up an issue. Because there are advocates of pro-life who would be against allowing abortion when halachically mandated. Okay? What you call partial birth abortion or whatever it is, and there's a whole question what exactly is a partial birth abortion. But the halacha is, until the head of the fetus, or a question of girsas in the Mishnah, or most of the fetus has exited the mother, you go in and you kill the fetus, even during labor. Okay, so the position and not only, by the way, that's not even a choice. Okay, if the mother is screaming and saying, no, don't kill the fetus, halachically you kill the fetus. It's a very interesting thing that most people don't recognize. That a lot of things we think are matters of choice aren't choice. When we say you halachically have to commit an abortion, right? It doesn't matter what the mother says. Okay? The fact is that means that the Torah's demand is to abort. So his concern is because there were pro-life positions that would not allow an abortion when totally advocated by the halacha, we have to support pro-choice. Because what does pro-choice at least allow? Allows a Jew to make the decision to be observant. And therefore we have to say the other side of allowing Jews to make decisions. Now the problem with it is, I spoke to so many people, there's a problem with it because there's another argument, because the fact is that in the laws of the Noahide Code, okay, the abortion laws for non-Jews is even more stringent than for Jews under the Noahide Code. So the fact is Moshe is basically saying that even though we would be allowing non-Jews to abort, we have to protect our rights to make halachic decisions. Other people said he still doesn't understand because many Jews would use pro-choice to abort. So it's a very powerful issue. But on the surface, it seems Moshe is basically saying that we have to take positions that allow people to make decisions to follow halacha, even if this will also allow individuals to make decisions that would be keneged halacha, against halacha. And that raises issues in terms of questions of lifnei iver, of assisting someone else with an avera, and so forth and so forth. So you see, it becomes a very, very complex and complicated issue. And that's really what this is about, is how do you deal with trying to observe Judaism, observe Torah, in an environment. What is the environment that you want? And how do you look at that environment? Okay, so that's an example of that. Okay, so the fact is, as I mentioned, what we're talking about is our value system within another value system, and how do we deal with it. Okay, so we're going to deal with a lot of these type of issues on practical levels. We're also going to deal with it should always put it on vibrator before you go share. Okay, there's that. Okay, but sometimes you let it ring like that. You say, yes, it's very important. Yes, I'm sorry, Steve. I can't speak to you now. Call me tomorrow before you go into the House of Commons. You know, that kind of answer you give that impression that you know. Or Barak, I can't talk now. Call me back in an hour. Okay. Anyways.
Can you remember to bring home milk?
Okay. Now, the fact is that we're going to deal with practical issues of that nature. And that's when we talk about what should be our position vis-a-vis same-sex marriages, what should be our position versus reproductive rights. We already talked about a little bit, some of the issues. But the first thing I want to deal with as a starting point is how do we look at this external value system? How are we supposed to see it? See, when we think in terms of halachic analysis, we think of it in terms of it existing within a vacuum. Okay? In other words, either we're in Eretz Yisrael, we're all by ourselves, and we can make decisions in a totally Jewish environment. Okay, but the fact is how do we deal, or that we're now dealing with foreign environments in which we find ourselves. So how do we look at? We ask practical questions. How do we make decisions given this foreign environment? And that could be a hostile environment as well. For questions of, like an example of a question in a hostile environment is, when do you say Yehereg Val Yavor? Okay, you're in a society, what commandments, or what would you be allowed to violate, what you would not allow to violate, because of the idea that there's certain commandments you can't violate, even if your life is being threatened. Those are questions of how to operate within a foreign environment, and that type of analysis. The point is that those are practical issues. How do we deal with it? But one of the things that I first want to deal with is, how do we look at this foreign environment? Okay, in other words, there could be hostile environments. We know that the environment around us is keneged Torah and it's going to be hostile. But there's other environments that it's not so simple to define. And what I mean by environments of that nature is environments where we already have certain, we're dealing with values, and we are already having reactions and perceptions to these values, such as the present environment we're in right now. And that makes the analysis much more studious and much more complex. So let's look at this, for example, in terms of Canada. Canada has a value system. Okay, I'm not thinking in terms of roots of Christian value system. Canada has a value system. The States has a value system. So we live within this value system, but how do we look at this greater value system? Do we have a feeling about it or not a feeling about it? And how will that affect our understanding of how to relate to this value system? Okay? And let's take as an example of this the concept of freedom of religion. Okay? How many people here think that there's a value in the concept of freedom of religion? That's it? Is there a value in the concept of freedom of religion?
I think it's not a value. It's more like government stays out of other people's business.
Is that a value?
No.
So you think the government should get involved in people's business?
No, I say that it's not a value. I think the word you're using, value, is not.
The fact is in terms of that concept of value, whatever is it, standard? It's a position. It's a position that they're taking that is based upon some type of standard. You're saying it's right for the government not to be involved in other people's business. Okay? So I'm saying, what do you think of that standard, that value? Do you think it's a good one or not a good one? Would you like to live in a country that has that or doesn't have that? Or what?
It's not a Jewish value.
Oh, interesting question. But the fact is, do you have a positive feeling towards it or not? Yeah?
Well, if we didn't live in a country that had freedom of religion, then we would have to be able to have our religion. So it is in our favor.
Right.
Unless we all lived in Israel.
Let me ask you something. In Israel, that's true, it's in our favor now. But what happens if you were in Israel and you were going to establish a government in Israel, right? And you're in charge. Would you apply freedom of religion? Hey, it's beneficial over here, but would you? Why? You're going to get what you want anyways. Your religion is going to be okay. Would you apply it in your country? If you were making a country?
I would.
Oh, so you think it's a good value?
Yes.
Okay, but you don't think it's a Torah value?
No.
So you would not apply in your country? I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm just saying, would you apply in your country?
Well, it depends on whether there's a whole church-state separation.
Well, in your country, if you're going to make a Torah country, you don't have any separation of church and state. We don't believe in separation of church and state, right?
That's why I say it's not a...
You're right. Therefore, if you were going to set up a Torah country, you would not bring in the value of freedom of religion. You'll benefit from it over here in America. It's great, love America, freedom of religion. But I'm going to go set up a nice Jewish country over there. Freedom of religion? No way. It's against Torah. Is that what you're advocating? Okay.
Why is it against Torah?
Where does Torah say you can have freedom of religion? Freedom of religion.
You can't have freedom of religion.
Because basically, if you go through the Chumash, it doesn't seem to be very tolerant.
Yeah, but not
It's ambiguous, and there's room for flexibility and for individuality.
Okay. The term is that basically it's used a lot of times in terms of foreign religious person is mot umat. You shall die.
What? The what?
You shall die. Mot umat. The fact is that if you're an idolater, you'll die. You'll get killed.
No, but also
That's just idolatry. It's not every other form of religion.
Oh, so the point is you want to go through. Well, is Christianity idolatry?
I think it is, but some people say it's not.
Well, the fact of the matter is it's not so simple that it's not. The truth is it depends on what type of Christianity in terms of how liberal Christianity is. So you get a whole issue. Same issues with Muslim. But is there other problems with that religion? If you look in terms of the Rambam says that even the invention of a foreign religion is problematic for non-Jews. It says they can't invent their own religion. Now the truth is that I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying this is the bottom line. I'm raising the question. But what's really interesting over here is I once had this discussion with someone in a shir I gave, must be maybe over 15 years ago, closer to 20 years ago. I gave a shir, and there was one person there who went to day school, like from a religious background, so forth and so forth. And I mentioned questions about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? Which are these Torah values? And he looked at me and said, "What are you talking about? Of course they're Torah values." I said, "Really? What's your proof?" And what he did was basically these are values that you're indoctrinated from within Canadian and Western society to be values. And we think they're values. And we feel that they're values. And we stand by these values.
What is the definition of freedom of religion?
That's a good question.
Because it comes back to definition. If we eliminate Christianity and all the other religions and we call ourselves a religion, is there freedom to practice secular humanistic Judaism? Is that
from a Torah perspective?
No.
No. The fact of the matter is that from an American perspective, if you when I remember when I was in New York, it might be during the days it was at YU, and a friend of mine wanted to get tickets to the Yankees. It turned out that both Yankee Stadium and Shea Stadium, if you were a clergyman, you got a clergyman discount. So he goes back one day and says, "Guess what? I remember I got this over the mail. I'm a clergyman now. I can actually marry people and stuff like that." Why? I sent it away. It was some basically like invented religion. And the States, it's so much freedom of religion that Hey, there could be the religion of Bum's garage shop, you know?
That's what I'm saying. What is the definition of religion?
In religion in the United States, it's basically everybody believes, and secular humanism would be religion. But the truth is that that's a question you can ask in terms of what should define freedom of religion in America or something like that. But from our perspective, I'm just asking on a blunt idea. I just want to bring up a basic idea that we think of this value called freedom of religion. But any way you define it, it means that you walk down the street and they say, hey, it's really nice to see you do your Jewish thing, and right next door to you is a Catholic priest, and he says, and I'm able to do my Catholic thing. And we think that it's wonderful that we're able to do it because we benefited from it. Ramosha called America the Medina Shel Chesed. Look what we've done over here. Look what we're able to live. We're here. This is because of freedom of religion. The point is, wait a sec. We're able to do this. Let's take an example in terms of Torquemada. Okay, let's take Torquemada. Okay, I'm sorry. You want to?
I was going to say, also with this gentleman, they were saying, what's the definition? Because it's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can have, as we see in the news, people are anti-Semitic and whatnot, and it's freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can have a religion that's anti-Semitic, and they're saying that's their religion, so it's freedom.
The fact is that's where you get.
So the thing is, it's nice to have the freedom to be Jewish and to show your Jewishness and belong and all that. It's the same thing, but with the Catholic and other religions. But I think anytime you have an open blanket of freedom, there's got to be some guidelines, because I don't think you can have total freedom.
Okay, the fact of what you're raising is a major problem that now exists in Canada, United States. And it's a battle between different freedoms.
Yes.
Okay? And that's a problem within America and within Canada. Okay? There was a court case recently in Quebec, which had it was a major reason where they had a kosher kitchen in a kosher dining hall in a hospital in Quebec, and there was an individual who was an ambulance driver who came in there and ate his non-kosher sandwich in that place, and it became a battle in the Quebec legislature, in the Quebec courts, between two freedoms: the right of this individual to basically eat wherever he wants to in the hospital, versus the right of the Jews to have a place for kosher. We have that battle all the time. In the United States, it's becoming another battle connected to same-sex in terms of homosexuality. In the sense that in the United States, I don't know if it ever got passed from the New York legislature, but the New York legislature passed a law that you have to teach, every school in the United States has to teach a course on discrimination. Included in that course on discrimination is homophobia, or saying things about equal rights or in favor of not being prejudicial based upon same-sex orientation. And this drove the Hasidic schools in New York crazy. Now, we're not going to advocate against gays, but they found it very difficult in their schools to teach that the promotion of the rights to choice, the choice of sexual preference. That was difficult. It was a battle, and the battle was freedom of religion versus what do you call it? Discrimination. These are battles within the American-Canadian system. Okay? That's not what I'm dealing with right now. What I'm dealing with, by the way, these are answers we have to have as well, with repercussions. What side do we take in these battles? Because we have to be careful about protecting our freedoms as well. If we take one side, we're going to have problems. We're going to have to deal with those issues as well. That's one of the issues here. But the point is what's really an issue here is that we as Jews abide by Torah, and Torah is given, and then Torah, it lives within this environment of our world around us, the greater environment of the world around us, And we have to know what Torah positions we should take in that greater environment. But one of the things I'm just trying to raise now is that the values of that greater environment itself has a value structure. And we relate to that value structure. We have our own, let's say, standards or whatever. We have our own impressions about that structure. So if you believe in freedom of religion, in whatever you believe that, or let's call it tolerance, okay? Then the point is in believing in tolerance, okay, and then you go to the Torah world, well, now you have an issue where is that value also a Torah value? How do I relate to these two values or these two considerations being in my consciousness? Where on one hand I say, you know something, I've benefited from this freedom. I think it's a worthwhile freedom. On the other hand, it's really problematic. If I was setting up my own country, would I apply that system? Could I apply that system if I was applying a totally Torah-only society? And those are the tensions that the first tension to deal with is understanding how can I look at this outside system. I brought up the question of Torquemada. Okay, let me give you an example from Torquemada. Okay, everyone talks about Torquemada was a Grand Inquisitor of Spain. Okay. A lot of people say he was a Meshumad, he was a converted Jew, but he was a Grand Inquisitor of Spain at the time of the expulsion of Jews from Spain. Right? Famous story goes that Donna Barbanel, who himself was a Rishon, a major rabbinic figure in Spain, was also the treasurer of Spain. He goes to Ferdinand and Isabella and basically tries to argue with them, are you crazy kicking me out? I'm your man. I mean, come on, the Jews keep your country going. And he was already before Ferdinand and Isabella, and the story goes that all Torquemada did is he walked into where the king and queen were seated with a cross, and just held the cross out in front of them like this. And that was it. Ferdinand and Isabella did not retract the expulsion, and the Jews were expelled from Spain. The fact is, it wasn't just the Jews who were expelled from Spain. What was Torquemada's real purpose? It wasn't just the Jews.
Were there a lot of Islam people still in Spain?
Muslims were kicked out at the same time. Right. He wanted what?
He was concerned about what was going on in the rest of Europe with the beginnings of the Reformation,
right,
and Protestantism influencing the Catholics in Spain.
He wanted a monolithic society of Catholic values. Now you think about that.
They got 25% unemployment. They're not doing too hot.
Well, that's years later. They've suffered for that.
No, they still have 25% unemployment.
I understand. Anyways, okay. Remember when Carlos became king again? One of the first things he said was, "Please, Jews, come back. We're sorry. Please come back." Okay, but the fact is that the reality is he wanted a monolithic Jewish society. Monolithic Catholic society. Now, how many times, now you think about that, how many times hear people saying, you know, I like to send my kid to that school, and it's only from people go to that school.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's true.
It's only from people going to that school.
Before you can go.
Yeah, what are they doing? They want a monolithic society. So in a certain way, they're agreeing with Torquemada.
They're not kicking out.
They aren't kicking people out. They're not agreeing with
what you want for yourself.
Right, but you're right. So Torquemada had a more difficult situation in the sense that. But if you think about this on the value consciousness, the point is you look at Torquemada. What he wanted was a monolithic. But since I'm on the out, it affected me. But maybe if I'm on the in, I'll adopt the same idea. Or do you take a pluralistic, heterogeneous attitude and say, hey, listen, we want a multicultural society. Right? But if you do that, then you're going to get a lot of influences that you may not like. This is a battle that's going on in Canada, United States these days and so forth. But the fact is that that's all part of the issue. But the fact is, what is the Torah position on it? So in a certain way, we've benefited from a positive attitude toward heterogeneity, and we've really suffered at the hands of a monolithic vision. We do not look upon Nor Gemara as too positively. Okay? We like America because it's let us in and let us be the way we want to be. But how do we look at these values? And that will affect not only how we will set up a country by ourselves, but accept our mind consciousness. See, there's a famous, or there's something that always hit me as part of this issue. Many, many years ago, the Nazis in America wanted to march in Skokie. I don't know if any of you remember this. Okay? They wanted to march in Skokie. That's it. Just march down the street in Skokie. They asked for a parade, for the parade thing and permit and so forth and so forth. And I remember I saw a news interview with the head of the Nazi Party, and he had his nice, lawyer from the ACLU defending him. We'll say a nice Jewish lawyer from the ACLU, but I can't carry it. But defending their right for freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech, so forth, so forth. They would not cause violence, and so forth and so forth. What?
What year was this?
I forget. Was it 73, 80, 70, 73, 80? I don't know. And then I remember, and this really hit me. One of the reporters asked the Nazi. The Nazi said, "You don't believe in freedom of speech. So, like, if this was your country, you'd never let Jews walk down the street like this. So you don't believe in freedom of speech. How can you apply this idea here, right?" And what do you think the Nazi said? He said, "If you're stupid enough to have this idea of freedom of speech, then why can't I take advantage of your stupidity? Of course, I would never have such a stupid concept in my country." And that really affected me. And what got me is wait a second. Can I say that about Eretz Yisrael? If I was going to set up an Eretz Yisrael that was going to be al-pi Torah, and here I am benefiting from freedom of religion and freedom of speech, and feeling, gee, this is great, this is tremendous. Do I look upon the people who develop freedom of religion as, hey, if you're not committed to your religion and you're stupid enough to let me practice my, to let me do what I want to do because you're weak or whatever, I'm going to take advantage of you. But it was my country, boy, I'd make sure you'd follow my way. Or would I say, wait a second, I benefited from this. I see a value in this. What do I do if I was going to set up a mind country? And that changes my way of looking at this world. Yeah.
There's an ancillary value in specifically just speaking about this whole. Let's just speak about the speech because I think that one's very clear. Ancillary value is stuff corrupts over time, right? Like the longer stuff goes on, the longer it has the tendency to get people who become in power and amass fortune and power, and whatever they preach loses coherence with practice. However, when you allow these freedoms to occur, it evokes some transparency, and then those people get beheaded, and life goes on. A new, monolithic society can emerge, which is honest for the first generation, and then whatever. I mean, I'm being a little bit funny because I think that the value in being able to dissent is a very, very important one.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you're finding a value for freedom of speech that should also exist within a Torah world in a certain way. But you're also doing is giving a reason for that value, which would raise an issue. So if I told you within Torah this value did not exist, you'd say, wait a second, that's weak. So what happens by living within two value systems? If we lived within a narrow Torah world, we'd have one value consciousness. By living in a broader Torah, in a broader system where we live within another system and we see the benefits of having that value, well, it makes us reconsider how we're going to look at Torah values. Like, for example, talking about another one of the freedoms. Most people think the freedom of the press is totally quashed by the concept of Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, you can't talk about anyone. right? Even if it's true, you can't malign them. So Bill Clinton was in the Torah Society. Monica who? What's a Monica? We never hear about it, right? And this is mentioned so many times, and so many people apply the concept of Lashon Hara in such a way as, oh, you can't say about that. See, there's situations like that with shidduchim. Forget on the political stat. Shidduchim. Yeah, I knew that this person was a serial killer 10 years ago, and was on heavy medication, so forth and so. But I couldn't tell the person because Lashon Hara. Except for one little problem. You have another chiyuv that you had to tell the person, because al taman al dam re'echa is you can't hold back evidence or information that is important for someone else's well-being. So the truth is that if you were in a Torah society, a lot of people think freedom of the press would be totally thrown away. Not true, because we know the values of freedom of the press. And guess what? We take that in and it opens up new vistas understanding Torah. The fact is that, no, we would not have the National Enquirer in a Torah society.
Then how would you know about Tiger Woods?
Well, okay. Well, maybe it's not as important to know about Tiger Woods. But the fact is that I don't think we would have the National Enquirer in a Torah society. But I think we'd still have a vigilant press within certain direction. Because there's certain things the press does that really is off the wall. But the point is you're dealing with issues, because the fact is part of this issue is not just pragmatically. Question I asked for Moshe, in terms of how we deal with certain issues and our stands in the world and so forth, which is part of it. And we're going to have to deal with it in terms of same-sex marriages. We're going to have to deal with it in terms of the freedoms and so forth and so forth. What stands do we take? But the fact is that also is a matter that by living within the society, we develop consciousness about the greater society. We by being involved in the experiences with the greater society, develop certain attitudes towards it. And therefore we go back and say, wait a second, that seems from my perspective to make sense. Now what do I do with what I think the Torah is saying over here? Gee, for me it makes sense that we should have a monolithic Torah world. But wait a second, I've just benefited from this allowance for heterogeneity in the world. Does that affect the way I look at that statement within Torah? And maybe it opens up new questions within our own Torah understanding as well. So what I'm saying is one of the first questions we have to look at is, how do we look at the greater society? Do we just reject it? Do we see it as just simply all, Hevel Varik? We don't really care what they do out there. It's not the guy in there, freedom of press, we don't care about it? Or is it, wait a second, we've experienced this, it has touched our consciousness, it has brought out certain value perceptions within ourselves. So, wait a second, how do we now understand our own integration of these values into our being with the Torah values? And that's a question for each of us and so forth, in terms of looking at these values. Okay? So, and the truth is it really touches upon attitudes like this. I point this out to many people, and has to be done with a certain amount of caution. Lahavdei Havdalos. But in the post-Holocaust era, there has been a lot of issues with the tzivui of destroying Amalek. Right? Okay? And you look at this, and a lot of people say, gee, it's really difficult commandment to destroy Amalek. And the fact is people look at it and say, well, the simple answer is, what was wrong with the Nazis? Do you feel there was something wrong with genocide? Or do you feel there was something wrong with I have no problems with genocide, it's just that he wanted to do it against the Jews. But genocide itself, I don't have problems with. Is that the way you look at it? Because if you look at it that way, I don't have any problems with genocide, just he wanted to do it against the Jews, then you don't have a problem with Amalek. That genocide, I have no problems with. But if you look at it as, gee, wait a second, I'm against that makes me against genocide, and that leads me to be against genocide. Well, then what do you really do with the mitzvah of Amalek? Okay? And that itself is an example of a type of tension. Okay, and Baruch Hashem, we don't have to deal with it. And when Mashiach comes, we'll deal with it. But the fact is that's an example of that type of tension.
What is our position on genocide?
I think we're generally against it. But except for Amalek.
Yeah.
Except for Amalek. The fact is that I point out to people, for example, that and there was also genocide against the Shiva Ananim, the inhabitants of Israel. Yeshua basically said, okay, you guys, you got three choices: get out, observe the Noahide laws, or you're toast, right? But I point out to people, and people say, yeah, they say we should do the same thing with Palestinians today, Chas v'shalom. So I say, wait a second, let's understand Yeshua's status. Okay, Rachav says what the people of Yericho knew. Rachav tells the boys, hey, we all know the story what happened in Egypt, right? We all heard what happened to the Egyptians. They got their handed to them, and that was the most powerful nation in the world, and everyone knew that. And also, remember, if you're going to apply the Torah, what happened? This nation of 3 million people walked through a desert covered by a noneh hakavod, by this protective cloud, right? Having a well following them along the way, right? Having food coming down from Shemayim, right? And basically pretty well known that they're being taken care of by God. They show up on the border of Israel and say, hey, we're here. Okay? Now, you're looking at a nation that says, no, we're going to fight you. This is not a situation I can basically understand. And Rachav basically says, we all know who you guys are. Well, that tells me these people are somewhat problematic, because they're not getting the message, and it's obvious what the message is. So that gives me an understanding of what happened a little bit more, but it still doesn't answer the question totally. But the fact is that these are part of the issues that we deal with. But the truth is we have developed value consciousness because we've existed in this world. We've developed value consciousness because we've been in hostile environments. So we don't like Torquemada. We develop positive value, positive consciousness in America, where they have a concept of freedom of religion. So when we ask this question, how does Judaism look, or how does Torah look at freedom of religion, we already have a positive feeling towards freedom of religion because we've benefited from it, and we see the value of what it entails. With all respect, that there are other problems, because freedom of religion could also allow some crazy guy to say freedom of religion and blow up some World Trade Towers. So these are tensions that we exist with. But the question is how do we look at it from a Torah perspective? Practically, what positions do we take in the greater political realm? What positions do we take in our own realm? And also, in a theoretical realm, how do we relate to existing within the influences of two value systems? The Torah value system and the external value system, which we have experienced. Do we just simply reject it, or do we sit there and say that there's some purpose to that, or there's some value in what our experience? Okay, so this is where we'll take up from here. There were other things I was going to get to tonight, so that's good. I'm already a little prepared for next week, so be along the way. But the fact is expect at the end of the 6 weeks to basically, for me to say, okay, there's a few more pages I have to do, but we didn't get to it. But the fact is that maybe the thing with these type of series is that we say, okay, the next semester will be next year, so forth, so we can move this along. But the fact is, I think it's a very fascinating topic in terms of, if you really look at it, how we relate to the world, because we do have influences in how we develop values, and we are not only Torah-only Jews. We have other value consciousness, and it becomes a very interesting question of how we relate with these different influences on our thought processes. Okay, any?
Is it simplistic then to say we shouldn't be here?
What?
Is it simplistic to say we shouldn't be here?
In America? The fact is that it's an interesting concept. Why were we in Galus? There's two reasons given for why we're in Galus. One reason is in the Gemara that says that in Galus we were there to find Gerim. The Gemara Pesachim says that we're in Galus in order to get Gerim, which raises the whole issue about Gerim and so forth and so forth. The argument that Judaism is against Gerim is a very simplistic argument. It's very, very simplistic. First of all, there's historical reasons that the reason we didn't promote conversion in medieval Europe was because if people converted to Judaism in medieval Europe, not only would they get killed, but the church would take it out on the Jewish population. So therefore, there was historical reasons for Jews to say, hey, please, thank you, but no thank you. But in addition to that, yes, we did have very strict standards upon Geras, but the truth is that most people don't recognize it. There's actually one of the Taryag mitzvahs is to convert someone who truly is worthy of conversion. So there's a famous medrash that says that there was a woman named Timnah who was really a person who wanted to convert, and they say Beth of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. She was in the time of the Avos, and she wanted to convert, and she was rejected. And the punishment for us rejecting her and wanting to convert is that her son was a Malek, and that was the punishment for it. And maybe before if shtickle Torah, maybe I'll hand out to you before Purim in terms of what I wrote might be the real tikkun of the Timnah problem, but the Timnah oinus. But the fact is that there's an interesting question. How did I get off? About conversions. About conversions. The fact is that the truth is that the Gemara says is we're there to get converts. But in a broader sense, we are there to spread Jewish values into the world. On the other hand, there's another argument that's presented that we are there also. There's another argument that's presented that we are there to collect, to be mekadesh the values the attributes of the Gentile nations. So they already have certain attributes, and we are to integrate those attributes into our being, and thereby to sanctify them. So the truth is much more of a dynamic relationship. So I'm not going to say we shouldn't be in Eretz Yisrael, because we should be in Eretz Yisrael, but I'm going to say that there is a reason why we're in this situation. There's a dynamic perspective of it, and the fact is that in a certain way, Torah has always benefited from the dialectic. The Torah is not a fundamentalist system. The Torah is a dynamic dialectic system, and dialectic demands questioning. So the truth is through experiences we raise questions. We're not afraid of questions. It opens up new ideas within Torah as well. So this is part of it.
Just an observation that the most insular societies tend to be the most backward ones.
Yeah.
If we look at just today.
Right, and the fact is that there's movement. But the truth is on the other hand, the most what we call open societies are the ones who have rejected traditional values very more easily, because the truth is it becomes more and more difficult to defend the archaic ways or whatever.
But I guess one quick point, building on Dr. Saffer's comment.
Yeah.
On the whole notion that I'm trying to get my head around on freedom.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're a small group of people that are emigrating from Europe to find safety in North America,
yeah,
freedom is a wonderful thing.
Right.
But when you represent 2% of the global population, or 1.25%, under 2%, and probably 2.5% of the North American population, freedom of religion or freedom of speech becomes very dangerous, because you're empowering groups that aren't deserving of it.
Yeah, and
you're providing a vehicle for tremendous.
And that's an issue in freedom of speech, but not a Torah issue. It's an issue that exists in Canada and the United States. That's an issue of you have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a movie theater. It's a battle they're having in the States right now. But gun control, right? The Constitution gives the right to bear arms. But wait a second, what arms? The point is that these are issues, but these aren't These are Torah issues. These are American. Now, the truth is that we as Torah Jews may have a stand on it, and maybe that's one of our considerations that we'll have to consider it. But you have to recognize the issue in itself, in its own environment, versus the issue for us is in a Torah perspective of how we relate. So the question you're asking about freedom, that's a problem in their perspective. We may have a voice in that argument from our Torah perspective. But you have to understand that the issue you're raising is a problem in America and Canada. They have a real problem of how to balancing freedom of religion. Freedom of speech. They have a lot of problems. But in terms of balancing the various freedoms, that's growing and growing and growing. However, we have to recognize that we're going to be discussing, while we will touch upon those type of discussions, because we may want to have a stand in that type of discussion, we may want to take a position, okay, as Torah Jews, but the point is, what I'm raising here is a Torah question. That once you talk about the breadth of this issue, you're basically now dealing with a new dialectic within our minds as Torah. So the question that we're going to be dealing with is a pragmatic question. What stands do we take in the general world, but also a question of how does this general world affect us in our own Torah consciousness? And obviously this touches upon the issue of a lot of different perspectives. Also it touches upon issues of how we value secular thought. We don't value secular thought. Even in terms of secular thought, you have tremendous arguments in secular thought. The Vilna Gaon said that for every amount of secular thought that you don't know, you are missing 20 times as much of Torah. And there's other people who say that the minute you study secular knowledge, it will prevent you from really understanding the pure Torah. So there's a lot of different viewpoints, but anyways, this is what we're going to be doing.
Isn't that the role of the rabbis to help us go to
Absolutely. But the fact is that one of the things about you say in terms of the roles of the rabbis is it's also the fact that we have an informed populace. Our rabbis are not Catholic priests. We don't advocate the Dark Ages. We advocate, contrary to their idea of keeping everything hidden from individuals, our idea is to bring it down to every individual as a concept of Limud Torah. And the truth is interesting enough, there are positions within Judaism that say that really every person should be a posek for their own. You should have enough knowledge to be your own posek. You don't have that knowledge, and you have to ask a shiloh. But you should really have your own knowledge. So the truth is that even as rabbis, you have to have rabbis, you have to have gedolim, and so forth and so forth. But the truth is we are a informed populace, and therefore these questions should be asked by everyone. And if you get enough knowledge, you should make your decisions. Okay? So hopefully we'll see you guys next week as well. This will be on KosherTube, by the way.